Imagine for a second just standing in the very center of a bustling foreign marketplace.
Oh, I can picture that.
Right. The sights, the sense of these completely unfamiliar spices, and just the symphonies of a language you have literally never heard before. It's all just swirling around you in this dizzying cascade.
It adds a lot to process.
It really is. You are completely out of your element and maybe even, a little overwhelmed by it all. But then a stranger locks eyes with you across the crowd and offers this warm, unmistakable smile.
That is such a universal moment.
Instantly, you feel this profound sense of shared humanity. I mean, it just cuts completely through the foreign fog. You don't speak a single syllable of their language, but in that fraction of a second, you completely understand each other.
It's incredible, yeah. It is such a powerful moment, and it feels entirely instinctual. I think anyone who has traveled or, just found themselves in a really unfamiliar community has probably experienced some version of that instant connection. It's like this silent communication that somehow totally bypasses the need for translation.
Which honestly brings up a massive question, and it is the entire mission of our deep dive today. We want to know, are our deepest, most automatic emotional reactions hardwired into our biology? Like, are they evolutionary gifts from our ancestors, or are they actually completely scripted by the specific society we happen to live in?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. And to figure this out, we are blending insights from a really comprehensive NOBA Project chapter on culture and emotion by the researcher Jeanne Tsai, alongside some incredibly fascinating intro to psychology lecture notes from a Dr. Riordon. We're basically going to use these to map out the very architecture of human feeling. Okay, well, let's unpack this.
To really appreciate where the science actually stands today, we kind of have to look at the historical battleground over this exact question. Because for decades, particularly in the mid-20th century, there was this fierce, almost philosophical standoff in the scientific community. You basically had two highly polarized ideologies. On one side, you had the universalists.
So that's the biology camp, essentially, right?
Exactly. The universalists asserted that emotional states are purely instinctual. They argued that these reactions are just biological mechanisms, totally permanently hardwired into our nervous systems by evolution.
So they thought emotions were just like reflexes?
Yeah, pretty much. In this view, basic emotions function identically across all geographic boundaries because they are ancient survival tools. A smile signals safety, or fear prepares you to run away from a predator. To a universalist, the hardware is just the same no matter where you were born.
I mean, that makes intuitive sense on the surface. We all have the same brains, right? But you've also got the other side of the ring weighing in.
Right, the social constructivists. And they took the exact opposite stance. They claimed that human groups adapted uniquely to completely distinct environments. So that made our emotions highly variable, basically man-made cultural creations.
Wait, so they didn't think biology played a part at all?
They downplayed it massively. Their argument was that our cultural practices are so deeply internalized from the absolute moment we are born that we literally become blind to them. We think of feeling as a natural instinct, but to a constructivist, that instinct is actually just a really, really well-learned cultural script playing out in your brain.
And how do you even measure something as subjective as a feeling across the globe to prove who is right? I mean, it's not like you can take a tape measure to a smile or, put sadness on a scale.
That was the exact methodological nightmare holding the whole field back. Up until the 1970s, at least. That's when two researchers, Paul Ekman and Wallace Friesen, introduced this scientific revolution. It was called the Facial Action Coding System, or FACS.
I remember reading about this in the notes. It sounds super intense.
It really was. Instead of just looking at a smile and calling it a smile, Ekman and Friesen mapped the actual micro-muscles of the human face. They cataloged the exact twitch of a cheek muscle, the involuntary crinkle at the corner of the eye. They essentially created a biological dictionary of every possible human facial movement.
That is wild.
And then they went global. They conducted these monumental studies where they asked participants from vastly different societies to match photographs of these specific facial configurations to translated emotion words.
Yeah, I saw some of the data from Dr. Riordon's notes on this, and the duality of their findings is just incredible. Because on one hand, basic emotional expressions were recognized globally at levels way, way above random chance.
Right, which means the universalists weren't entirely wrong.
Exactly. They had a point. We clearly do share a baseline. But then the recognition rates varied enormously depending on where they went. The notes point out that 95% of American participants anchored a specific smile to the concept of happiness. But when they ran the exact same test with participants in Sumatra, only 69% made that connection.
Yeah, and that massive variance, that is the smoking gun. It basically proved the existence of what researchers now call cultural display rules.
Cultural display rules, what does that mean in practice?
Oh, well, these are the unspoken, heavily ingrained societal rules that dictate the situational appropriateness of showing certain emotions. So you might feel the same underlying biological urge, the same rush of adrenaline or dopamine, but your culture dictates if, when, and exactly how intensely you are allowed to display it to the rest of the world.
That makes so much sense. And looking at Dr. Riordon's lecture slides, there are these amazing visual anchors reminding us of those biological roots, too. There's a slide discussing Coco the gorilla and another referencing the similarities between human and elephant emotional expressions.
Oh yeah, the animal kingdom parallels are fascinating.
It's such a great reminder that primary emotions like fear, grief, and anger, they emerge universally across entire lineages. We really do have that shared primordial hardware. So I was thinking about this. Are emotions kind of like a smartphone?
A smartphone? How so?
Like the biological roots, like fear or a basic smile. Those are the factory-installed hardware we all get out of the box, right? But the cultural display rules are the highly customized software settings we download as we grow up. They dictate when the apps run and who gets to see the notifications.
What's fascinating here is how perfectly that aligns with the modern scientific consensus. We have completely moved past the old either-or debate. It is undeniably both. Even Paul Ekman himself eventually realized this.
Oh, really? He changed his stance.
He did. He summarized it beautifully, actually, saying, the emotions are not localized in some separate part of the brain, but are a product of the whole brain and deeply intertwined with our cultural realities.
That is a great quote, but it brings up my next question. If culture is the software that we're downloading, how exactly is it programming our baseline code? Because, it feels like it's not just about when it's polite to smile at a stranger. It goes way deeper into how we define our actual selves.
Oh, absolutely. It alters the very foundation of human identity. Recent empirical investigations focus heavily on two distinct models of the self. There's the independent model and the interdependent model.
Okay, let's break those down.
Sure. So in Western contexts like North America, the independent model is completely dominant. This model trains individuals to view themselves as distinct, stable, autonomous entities. Your primary objective in life is to influence your environment, express your personal desires, and, stand out from the crowd.
You're supposed to be the main character of your own life. While East Asian contexts foster an interdependent model, which basically flips that entire objective on its head.
Totally. In an interdependent model, being a successful person means being fundamentally connected to a community web. Your goal isn't to stand out or exert your will. It's to adjust your personal desires to maintain social harmony.
You define yourself entirely by your relationships and your responsibilities to others. Let's actually test that because Dr. Riordon's notes mention the I am exercise used in these studies.
Oh, I love this exercise.
Yeah. If you ask me to do it right now, off the cuff, my brain immediately goes to, okay, I am a talker, I am curious, I am pretty stubborn, I am pulling personal, distinct traits that isolate me as an individual.
And by doing that, you're perfectly reflecting the American data set. American students almost exclusively use those isolated traits. But when Japanese individuals do the exact same exercise, they fill in the blanks with relational roles.
Like what?
They write things like, I am a daughter, I am a husband, or I am an employee. It is a completely different foundational view of existence. It's anchoring the self to the community rather than elevating the self above it.
And that foundational view has to radically alter how a person uses emotion. I mean, if I view myself as an independent entity, I'm using my emotions to influence the people around me. I'm expressing joy to show I'm winning or anger to get my way.
Precisely.
But if I view myself as interdependent, I'm probably utilizing emotional control to blend smoothly into my environment instead.
Which brings us directly to Jeanne Tsai's groundbreaking work on affect valuation theory. She proved that culture doesn't just dictate how we show emotion on our faces. It actually dictates our ideal affect.
Ideal affect. That's the term for the emotional states we actively desire and dream of feeling on a daily basis, right?
Exactly. It's what you actually want to feel. And when you look at those desires, the cultural divide is just massive. Western societies are obsessed with pursuing what researchers call high arousal positive states.
High arousal. So we're talking excitement, enthusiasm, absolute euphoria.
Exactly. Dr. Riordon's slides actually use a picture of people jumping out of an airplane, skydiving, to represent this peak Western ideal.
That makes perfect sense for the West.
But East Asian societies prioritize low arousal positive states, calm, peacefulness, serene tranquility. The slide for this is a group of people doing Tai Chi in a quiet park.
Wow, what a contrast. Skydiving versus Tai Chi.
And the physiological data backing up effect valuation theory is stunning because it isolates that software from the hardware. Researchers hook participants up to heart rate monitors and track their physiological arousal while asking people from different cultures to relive identical positive life events.
And what happens under the hood?
Physiologically, their bodies are reacting exactly the same way. Their heart rate spiked to the same beats per minute, the sweat gland activity is identical. But their outward facial behaviors diverge dramatically.
Let me guess. The Westerners are more expressive.
Way more. European Americans will smile far more intensely and broadly during those reflections than their East Asian counterparts. The hardware is firing the exact same electrical signals, but the cultural software dictates a completely different output on the screen based on their ideal affect.
Okay, wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Let's talk about the pursuit of those high arousal states. I understand the outward expressions differ, but isn't happiness universally a good thing? How could actively chasing happiness, even if it's the high arousal, skydiving kind, ever be a bad idea?
It sounds counterintuitive, right? But that is the exact paradox researcher Brett Ford and his team set out to solve in this breathtaking 2015 study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology.
What did they find?
They looked at how the deliberate pursuit of happiness affects psychological well-being across the United States, Germany, Russia, and East Asia. For individualistic American students, they found that actively choosing happiness actually predicted significantly lower well-being.
Wait, really? Pursuing happiness makes Americans less happy. What is the mechanism behind that?
It comes down to the meta-emotion of the independent self. In an independent culture, happiness is treated as a high-arousal commodity. It's basically an individualistic metric of success. Westerners essentially turn happiness into a personal key performance indicator.
Oh, wow. So if you aren't happy, you're failing.
Exactly. If you are constantly monitoring your own joy and you aren't feeling ecstatic or enthusiastic, you feel like you are failing at life. That self-focused pressure creates anxiety, which paradoxically destroys the very happiness you were trying to catch.
That is so dark. But the collectivistic students in East Asia and Russia, they didn't experience that drop in well-being.
They experienced the exact opposite.
Mm.
For them, actively pursuing happiness predicted significantly higher well-being because in interdependent cultures, they aren't defining happiness by personal, high-arousal achievements. They pursue happiness through socially engaged, harmonious pathways.
So it's more about the group's happiness.
Yes, it's about protecting the feelings of the entire group. In fact, after a positive event, North Americans typically just report feeling good, period. But East Asians frequently report having mixed feelings. They are intentionally modulating their own joy so they don't overshadow someone else or disrupt the social balance.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go about your day? Because we aren't just talking about abstract psychological theories confined to a laboratory here. We are navigating an incredibly interconnected, highly globalized world where these emotional operating systems are constantly bumping into each other.
The real-world stakes are incredibly high because our emotions dictate literally every single daily interaction we have. When we misinterpret someone else's cultural display rules, it breeds toxic, systemic stereotypes.
Where do we see that the most?
The corporate world is a prime example of this friction. In many Western professional settings, leadership potential is unconsciously associated with high arousal positive traits: assertiveness, visible excitement, highly expressive enthusiasm.
Oh, absolutely. It's the person who speaks the loudest in the brainstorming meeting or the person pumping their fist when a big deal closes. We immediately code that as leadership material.
Which is exactly where the friction happens. When an East Asian individual operates from their cultural software in that same meeting, displaying a calm, reserved, low-arousal demeanor, it is frequently and fatally misinterpreted by Western colleagues as a sign of boredom, coldness, or total disengagement.
The Western boss just thinks, oh, they don't want this badly enough.
Exactly. And this creates an invisible systemic barrier that prevents highly qualified, brilliant individuals from securing top leadership positions, purely due to ethnocentric expectations, about what caring is supposed to look like.
It is deeply unfair, and it just shows how blind we can be to our own biases. But, if Eastern cultures are actively prioritizing group harmony and low arousal states over personal euphoria, what happens to all the negative emotions? Do they just swallow them? Let's look at how this plays out clinically.
Because the sources highlight the absolute necessity for psychology scholars to master this, calling it a life or death asset for clinical accuracy. The concept you were pointing to is called expressive suppression, consciously hiding your outward emotional responses.
Right, which sounds bad to a Western ear.
It is a perfect example of how clinical diagnosis is culturally bound. In the West, expressive suppression correlates heavily with severe depression, anxiety, and low life satisfaction. It's viewed as a pathological avoidance tactic by Western therapists.
Yeah, we tend to view emotional suppression like a dangerous pressure cooker. We are taught from a young age that if you don't let it out or vent your feelings, the pressure will just build up until you inevitably explode.
But in interdependent communities, suppression is not a pressure cooker. It is a vital, healthy tool for social adjustment. It acts as protective shield. You suppress your negative emotional exhaust to protect the community's harmony.
And does it hurt them psychologically to do that?
Not at all. The data shows it carries absolutely no negative consequences for their psychological health. It is a highly adaptive skill.
That is wild. And there was that 2021 clinical study on cultural ruptures that proved how damaging it is when clinicians don't understand that shield.
Oh, yes. That study is crucial.
The research showed that ethnic minority individuals frequently drop out of psychological care entirely because Western clinicians pathologize their culturally adaptive emotional suppression. The therapist tells them they're repressing trauma, and the patient just leaves feeling deeply misunderstood and alienated.
The study also noted that even the baseline manifestation of depression varies between these cultures. Depressed Westerners typically show muted emotional reactivity, like a flattening of their affect. They stop expressing.
But that's not true for East Asians.
No. Depressed East Asians often exhibit normal or even highly increased emotional expressiveness compared to their baseline. So if a therapist is operating solely on Western diagnostic criteria, they are literally looking right past the symptoms of a patient sitting right in front of them.
The medical anthropologist Arthur Kleinman warned about this exact blind spot. His quote in the materials is honestly kind of haunting. He said, "When we fail to understand the emotional language of another culture, we walk through a world of mirrors, mistakenly assuming everyone reflects our own inner image."
A world of mirrors, it's such a powerful image, and it forces a complete reassessment of how we practice empathy. Empathy isn't assuming someone feels the way you do, it's learning how they feel.
But having seen these massive real-world consequences, from passed-over promotions to failed clinical therapy, we have to ask where this all starts. How do these distinct values get programmed into us in the first place? Nobody sits a toddler down and gives them a complex lecture on the interdependent model of self.
It starts astonishingly early, literally right in the nursery. Empirical evidence shows that children's storybooks are prime vehicles for this socialization.
Storybooks, really?
Yes. If you open the best-selling picture books in individualistic nations, the pages are filled with highly excited expressions, wide-open smiles, and high-arousal activities like jumping and shouting.
Lots of exclamation points, I imagine.
Exactly. But if you look at the popular books in collectivist nations, the illustrations emphasize tranquil, serene themes. Characters display placid, calm expressions. Maybe they're just floating quietly down a river.
And the sources note that even just brief exposure to these specific cultural products directly alters a child's toy preferences in the laboratory. The kids learn immediately what kind of energy their society values. The text explicitly states that genetic differences matter far less than these taught value differences. Society is constantly handing us the script, page by page.
And that script isn't entirely static either. It can actually shift based on the structural stability of the society itself. There was a major 2023 empirical study by Ma, Savani, and their colleagues that looked at what they called tight versus loose societies.
What did they find there?
They found that when individuals feel a low sense of personal control, maybe because their academic GPA is plummeting or the national economy is facing severe instability, they instinctively adapt their psychological needs. They begin seeking out order and comfort through highly structured, tighter cultural systems. Our baseline psychological needs are constantly shifting in response to the chaos or stability of the institutions around us.
Which brings up an incredibly relatable and probably very stressful scenario for college students or young professionals today. If you are a bicultural student, say you wake up and have breakfast in an interdependent traditional immigrant household, and then you step onto a highly independent, individualistic, mainstream university campus for your morning classes, how on earth do you handle that emotional whiplash? You are essentially being asked to run two completely conflicting emotional operating systems at the exact same time.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have just identified the very frontier of future psychological research.
Hmm.
The field is finally aggressively moving beyond the simple North American versus East Asian binary.
That's good because the world is way more blended than that now.
Exactly. Scientists are now investigating exactly how bicultural individuals manage to integrate these conflicting emotional scripts without suffering massive psychological burnout. How do you respect your family's profound need for low arousal harmony at the dinner table, while simultaneously meeting your school or employer's demand for high arousal enthusiasm during a presentation?
It requires an incredible amount of psychological agility.
It really does. Jeanne Tsai stated that the ultimate goal of cross-cultural psychology is to discover the universal grammar of human emotion while celebrating the endless dialects in which it is spoken.
The universal grammar and the endless dialects. We all share the same primordial hardware, the baseline capacity to feel joy, fear, and sadness. But our culture provides this incredibly specific, highly nuanced software that dictates what we strive to feel and exactly how we display it to the world. So the next time you think a coworker is being cold or disengaged, or the next time you feel an immense pressure to be overly enthusiastic just to prove you care about a project, remember to check your cultural lens. You might just be misreading their dialect.
And as a final thought to leave you with, just consider the digital age we are all navigating right now. Global social media algorithms notoriously reward high arousal emotions.
Oh, yeah. Extreme outrage, euphoric excitement, intense visceral shock.
Exactly. We have to ask ourselves, are these algorithms artificially forcing a Western independent emotional template onto the entire globe? And in doing so, are we slowly, algorithmically erasing the beautiful, low arousal emotional dialects of other cultures?
That is a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying thought to chew on the next time you find yourself scrolling. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Take some time this week to observe the emotional dialects playing out in your own life, and we'll catch you next time.